Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll give you your complete Panther playing guide so that you can dominate each match in which you use any variant of the Panther tank. I'll give you an overview of the Panther, the variations of the Panther currently in-game, and the differences between them, their roles, what modules to research first, their strengths and weaknesses, general tips for how to most effectively play the Panther tanks, and I'll give some final advice, all while having relevant Panther gameplay in the background to illustrate my points. If you couldn't tell, I plan on this being the most comprehensive Panther video guide anywhere online, and it'll have plenty of nice facts as well about the Panther tanks. That said, this video took me well over a month to create, so subscribing would be amazing if you like this video. But without further ado, let's get into it. Currently, there are 5 general Panther tank variants in War Thunder. The Panther D, which is at 5.3 BR in Realistic, the Panther A and Panther F at 5.7 BR, the Panther G at 6.0, and the Panther II at 6.7. The other Panthers, such as the Ersatz M10, TV, and Panther Dauphine, are all basically just one of the 5 major versions, albeit with possibly some minor variations, but nothing major enough where gameplay is changed. I do not expect the total number of Panthers in War Thunder to change, unless you include maybe some captured Panthers, then maybe 1 or 2 might be added in premium tech trees in the future. Those captured Panthers, such as the TV in the Russian tech tree, and Dauphine in the French tech tree, or specialty Panthers such as the Ersatz M10, all play exactly the same as the German Panthers that I'll be focusing on in this guide. Being that they are just captured German Panther variants, or like the Ersatz, just a Panther made to kinda look like an M10 tank destroyer, because, hey, why not almost commit war crimes? Because of this guide will apply to all Panthers, be they in the German tech tree or not. Now with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the differences between the models, and believe it or not, there's actually quite a few differences with each and every model, and I'll try to go over every single one of them. I'll be using the Panther D as the baseline from which to compare all other models of the Panther. That said, as you can see here, the currently 5.3 BR Panther D has 4.2 to 6 degrees per second turret traverse depending on crew skill, 9.6 to 7.4 second reload depending again on crew skill, -8 to +20 degrees of cannon depression and elevation, a top speed of 55 kilometers per hour, 192 millimeters max of armor pen with APCPC ammunition coming from its high velocity 75 millimeter KWK-42 cannon. It also features smoke grenades and an LMG in the turret mantlet, and its cannon magnification is between 1.9 and 3.5 times. For armor, the Panther D has for front, sides, and rear of the tank 80, 40, and 40 millimeters for the hull, and for the turret, 100, 45, and 45 millimeters. Now, with that being said, again, each major variant is slightly different compared to the Panther D. So the A variant features a substantially improved turret traverse, a 50 horsepower stronger engine, meaning that it will be more mobile and will accelerate faster than the Panther D, even though it has the same top speed, and has a high-powered APCR ammunition option. The Panther A also features a top-mounted LMG that could be used for air defense. The M10 Ersatz is pretty much a Panther A, except with a slightly worse turret traverse, an armor layout closer to the Panther G, and no access to smoke grenades or APCR ammunition. Plus, the Ersatz has 3.5mm armor side skirts surrounding almost the entirety of the tank. In much the same way, the TV Panther is much more similar to a mix of the Panther A and Panther D in terms of being faster like the Panther A with the firepower of the D variant. The A also carries the same maximum ammunition as the D at 79 maximum rounds. Cannon magnification on the A is also 2.5 times to 5 times zoom, making it better than the Panther D. The A currently sits at 5.7 BR. From here, the Panther G has a much better turret traverse compared to the Panther D, although is less than what is available on the Panther A. It is also slower than the Panther D and A with a top speed of 46 kilometers per hour, which represents a 9 km per hour drop over the D and the A. It also has only a 600 horsepower engine, leading to worse acceleration despite weighing slightly less than the other variants. Like the Panther A, this also features usable APCR ammunition. Importantly, the G has more armor at about 10 millimeters more at the front of the turret, as well as having a thick turret chin that will basically get rid of the shot trap that would sometimes result in a ricocheted shell going right through the roof of the hull of the Panther. It also features around 10 millimeters more armor around the sides of the hull, which will help slightly if you're angling. Additionally, like the A, it has a turret roof mounted LMG for air defense. The G, along with the soon to be mentioned F variant, both carry 82 rounds of ammunition at max compared to the A and the D at 79 rounds each. The French tech tree Dauphine Panther is basically a Panther G, except that it lacks a roof mounted LMG, has no APCR ammunition, and lacks the very useful chin on the mantlet that the Panther G has. The G's cannon magnification is 2.5 times to 5 times, which is equal to the Panther A and better than the Panther D. The G currently sits at 6.0 BR. The Panther F is where it gets pretty crazy. It has the small term turret that has a different turret slash mantlet design, which is arguably better than the other turrets. Faster turret traverse compared to the Panther D, but still slower than the Panther A and Panther G, and better armor compared to the other turrets, with 120, 60, and 60 millimeters front, sides, and rear of the turret. Hull armor matches the Panther G. Interestingly, the Panther F has a slightly more modern cannon with the fastest reload speed of any Panther, cutting off around half a second of the reload compared to all other Panthers outside of the Panther II. It also has no roof-mounted MG, although it does have a lower profile commander's cupola, which reduces the size of an otherwise major weak spot. Unfortunately, however, it is the only regular Panther without an additional add-on armor module to unlock. The turret on the F is the same turret on the Panther II. Additionally, the reverse speed on the F and the G models is lower than the already terrible reverse speed on the D and the A models. Instead of the normal 4 km/h max reverse speed on the A and the D, the F and the G have a 3.3 km/h max reverse speed. Finally, the F features the best cannon magnification of the regular tech tree Panthers at 2.5 to 6 times zoom. The F currently sits at 5.7 BR. Both the F and the A variants are my two favorite regular Panther variants due to their combination of firepower, mobility, and armor. And at this point in the video, I'll go over the Panther II somewhat briefly just because you can no longer earn it, though there are still plenty of people that use the vehicle because they've earned it in the past. Now, it features an 88mm KWK-43 cannon, which is the same cannon which sits on the Tiger II-H and the Tiger II-P. Its normal APCBC ammunition can fire through 237mm of armor max, with APCR capable of penning 279mm. The Panther II also has heat ammunition, if you're into that sort of thing. Panther II also has the slowest reload of all Panthers due to the larger cannon, at between 11 and 8.5 seconds, depending again on crew skill. The Panther II also has the strongest engine, but weighs about 8 tons more than the other Panthers. Despite this, it is arguably the most mobile of the Panthers, with a forward top speed of 54 km/h and a reverse top speed of 14.4 km/h. It also has the same turret armor, features, and cannon magnification of the Panther F, although it has the second lowest turret traverse ahead of only the Panther D. The II is also the most well-armored Panther, with 100, 60, and 40mm front, sides, and rear for the hull. It is also the shortest Panther, if not including the huge night vision array on top of the turret. Speaking of the top of the turret, there is no roof-mounted MG on the Panther II, and it does feature the same smaller commander's cupola on the Panther F. Oddly, likely due to the increased size of the cannon, the Panther II has the lowest range of cannon elevation and depression, with it ranging from -8 to +15 degrees. Finally, as mentioned just now, the Panther II has first gen night vision, which, while theoretically useful, will not get used often, as night matches are very rare around the 6.7 BR that the Panther II sits. And now for one commonality that I've not mentioned before between all of the Panthers, including the Panther II, every single Panther in-game has neutral steering, although the Panther II has by far the best track traverse of any Panther in-game, with the others being roughly the same as each other. Before we continue, here are some fun facts about the Panther II. It was never actually created in full, with only the hull being fabricated. Currently, the hull sits at the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor, with a Panther G turret sitting on top of it in place of what would have been the actual small-term turret. The cannon was also initially a choice between the 88mm and the 75mm, which is on most other Panthers, but the German went with the 75mm as the likely option, despite the Panther II in-game having the 88mm cannon used in the Tiger II. This is because the 88 would have been too large for the small-term turret. Eventually, it was decided to not produce the Panther II as it was well behind schedule. It would take substantial retooling just to be able to create them. So the Germans instead opted for the Panther F, which would have begun production in April or May of 1945 had the war not ended. Eventually though, the E-50 would have replaced the production of all Panther tanks, as it would have standardized production from light tanks all the way up through super heavy tanks via the E or Entwicklung series. And now, with all of the major differences out of the way, let's go over the strengths of the Panthers, and first and foremost, they all have excellent guns. One of the best 75mm cannons in the entire game, whether it's the Panther D, G, A, or F. They are amazing. Panther F benefits from a very fast reload, and every Panther outside of the Panther D has access to APCR if needed. The 88mm on the Panther II is much the same as the 75 and can destroy nearly any enemy tank with ease. Second, they're great mobile firing platforms. You can hit accurate shots up to a kilometer or even more away while moving if you're good enough and if the terrain is cooperative. Third, they have good frontal armor, especially on the Panther D, being that it sits at 5.3 VR. All models still have great armor and have excellent angling capabilities, being that all Panther frontal glacis plates have a 55-degree construction angle. Fourth, they have neutral steering. This allows you to pivot in place without moving forward, which is a huge advantage, especially being that the turret traverse is somewhat mediocre at worst, and at best, it's average, depending on the variant. Fifth, it has good speed and acceleration. For their size and armor, all Panther variants are actually quite speedy. One could argue that the G and the F are not as fast as the other variants, and while this may be true, they're still faster than most other tanks of comparative size and weight. And for the sixth strength, this is somewhat related to the first strength, but I'll go over it anyways. All Panthers have amazing stock ammunition. Many tanks need to go through a hard grind until their best ammunition is unlocked. With all Panther models, you have that ammunition right from the start, which helps to make the grind for better modules much easier on the Panther than it would be with almost every other vehicle in game. And finally, for the major strengths, almost all Panther tanks can use smoke grenades, which will save you on a regular basis. This acts as great concealment if needing to reverse or simply just turn your tank. And now for the weaknesses, because although the Panthers are excellent tanks in War Thunder, they do, like every other vehicle, have weaknesses. First and foremost, probably the biggest weakness, terrible reverse speed. Among the absolute worst in-game for any vehicle. They only have between 3 and 4 kilometers per hour when not considering the much better Panther II. For weakness number 2, oftentimes they have mediocre turret traverse, namely on the Panther D and even the Panther II, but also extending a little bit to the Panther F, being that that's kind of the third slowest turret traverse of all the Panthers. Third, they have huge tracks. While these are beneficial to climbing steep inclines and are good for acceleration in poor terrain, they are also huge weak spots for all Panther models and are oftentimes the first thing to go when you're being flanked, making you almost helpless to defend yourself, especially considering that poor turret traverse. Fourth, they have a very distinctive profile. While many people will stay away from you, many others will purposely seek you out to kill you, whereas a more benign tank like a Sherman 76 for example might be left alone if there are numerous targets in the area. For the fifth weakness, they have flat, thin side armor on every single variant. This is made worse by the fact that much of your ammunition, along with most German tanks, is stored right on the most obvious parts of the side of your tank. You always have to watch your sides. For the sixth weakness, they all have fairly easy to pen turret faces, especially on the D, A, and G models. The small term on the F and Panther II largely fix this, however, though still aren't incredibly well armored. Additionally, the commander's cupola, as with most World War II German tanks, is also a weak spot, though again, at least with the Panther II and Panther F, these fix the issue with a smaller cupola. On a side note, the Ersatz M10 has the smallest cupola of all Panther tanks in game. Who knew? And now for the 7th weakness, bear in mind that although there are just as many weaknesses as strengths on this list, that the Panthers, in my opinion, have much stronger strengths than they do have weak weaknesses. So again, for number 7, the Panther E and Panther D models have a shot trap due to the rounding of the cannon mantlet on the bottom, sometimes sending shells directly into the hull via ricochet into the lightly armored roof. This is largely fixed in the Panther G and becomes a non-issue with the Panther F and Panther II, as these two models have the aforementioned small term, which is a totally different and, in my opinion, improved turret design. With everything before this out of the way, let's go into a section that originally I wasn't going to include, but I guess now I'll give you one do and one don't for playing the Panther tanks. So for your do when playing the Panther tanks, run a protection analysis and learn the weak spots of your Panther, or better yet, watch my Panther weak spot guide, link below, so you can know every single way that your Panther can die easiest. And for your don't, if you get into a brawl, or really any type of close to medium range fight, don't just sit there. Move your tank, and if your tracks are broken, move your turret and cannon constantly in order to minimize the risk of your turret being penned and your cannon being destroyed. This is especially true in a close range fight with the slower turret traverse Panther such as the Panther D. Use your neutral steering or move up and just turn really fast so you can supplement your poor turret traverse so that you can give yourself a slight advantage in any fight. For the roles of the Panthers, thankfully, Panthers are fairly simple to play. Pretty much all of them can act like anything that they want, but the two most effective roles are, depending on if you're in an up tier or a down tier, a spearhead or a flanker. In an up tier, flank, as your armor won't be able to stand up to the higher BR opponents quite as well as they would in a down tier. That said, in a down tier, be the spearhead and push with the main group of tanks on your team. The Panther is basically a heavy medium tank and, according to some World War II historians, fits the profile of a heavy tank better than a medium tank, though you can decide that for yourself. If you're in some weird BR zone where some tanks can wipe you out while others can't, like 6.0 BR, I would say to either flank or act as support for the front lines. Don't take too much confidence in your frontal armor because it is still defeatable, especially on the turret phase, but your cannon is also good through nearly 7.0 BR with the 75mm and through nearly 8.0 BR with the 88mm. With the Panther II, I'd say much the same, except that while you can be a front lines and or flanking tank, you should probably just stick to the role of a support tank, as your frontal armor isn't as good at 6.7 or 7.0 BR as the other Panthers armor is at their own BRs. Alternatively, if you'd like, a well-armored sniper is also very doable for the Panthers and also works somewhat well in conjunction with the flanker role, as you have incredibly powerful and accurate cannons on every single Panther tank, as well as good magnification for their BRs. Now that the roles are out of the way, let's go over some tips for how to best fulfill the roles of the Panther tank. For tip number 1, never push farther than your reverse speed can take you back, at least when trying to peek from corners and or play defensively. Seriously, this is a really big deal because you will be left out in the open, especially if there's no cover to help you out. Second, act as a spearhead, though flanking is also very doable as mentioned in the roles. The cannon, frontal armor, and top speed of every Panther is going to be excellent at whatever BR they sit. If in a down tier, try again for the spearhead, while an up tier might be conducive again to the flanking, though you can be successful in both. Likely even an up tier or a down tier, you can kind of mix and match roles. Third, learn to pivot your tank to aim, especially with the Panther D. The Panthers with the slower turret traverse really benefit from this skill, especially if you already have some forward momentum, though your neutral steering definitely helps. Fourth, always angle. The frontal armor is powerful by itself without angling, but with angling, you will be impervious to many tanks of lower BR and will still be a tough target for similar or even higher BR tanks. Additionally, though this may be obvious, always orient your Panther to nearly face the enemy at the start of any fight in order to limit exposure to your weak side armor. Fifth, while you can take damage, try not to brawl very often, as a smaller, more nimble tank can easily get around your Panther at close range and destroy you by shooting your side hull armor, especially if it's loaded up with ammunition. For tip number 6, if possible, use branches to obscure your frontal turret armor, especially on the mantlet, as this will be an often penned shot, especially if they're shooting the front of your tank. And finally, because your Panther has such large amounts of ammunition that it can carry, I would suggest only taking maybe 30 or 35 APCBC shells and maybe 5 to 10-ish APCR shells, unless you're the type to go through more shells than that in a game and will not reload at the base. This will dramatically cut the chance of an ammunition explosion caused by an enemy shell hit. Unfortunately, I myself did not follow my own advice relating to how many shells you can carry in the gameplay, at least for the most part. Learn from my mistakes. I got blown up a lot while recording this video. And now for what is the best ammunition option to use on your Panther. Basically on all Panther tanks from the D to the G and even the Panther II. As I mentioned before in the strength section, just use your stock ammo, which is the APCBC, PZGR, otherwise known as the Panzergranaten 39/42 on the D through G models, and the PZGR Panzergranaten 39/43 on the Panther II. Carry APCR with you just in case you have a flat piece of heavy armor to pen, but otherwise, the stock ammo on all Panther variants is the best that Panthers can get, and it's just excellent ammo all around. And now let's go over which modifications you should unlock first, and I'll kind of give you an order of all the modifications, and I'll be using the Panther A as the example here, because in my opinion, it's probably about the most common Panther. It probably shares the most features with every Panther, and certainly has pretty much all the modifications in common with every other Panther in game. So the Panther A is probably the best representation in this case. So that being said, first and foremost, you're going to want to get parts to unlock. That will be your first thing. Don't worry about tracks, horizontal drive, parts. Secondly, just as obvious, fire prevention equipment. Third, this kind of depends on preference, but I would say especially for the Panther D, I would go for adjustment of fire because it makes the cannon, which is already incredibly accurate, even more accurate. For the Panther D, as I mentioned, I would not go for horizontal drive because that gives an 18% better turret traverse rate. The thing is, when you're taking 18% from, like, let's say 4 degrees per second, that's hardly, maybe less than a degree per second of turret traverse. Whereas on the Panther A, you might be having a much greater benefit from having the horizontal drive. So this kind of depends on if you're more of a sniper or more of a brawler. But again, I personally would go for adjustment of fire and then would go for horizontal drive. Now, beyond that, I would go for crew replenishment because, in my opinion, crew replenishment is incredibly important. Oftentimes, you will have your loader killed, and the loader on the Panther is one of the, with any tank, is one of the most important positions out there. Definitely go for that. Second, I'd be tempted to say elevation mechanism, maybe if you're a sniper again, but really I would go with smoke grenades. Heck, you could even go with smoke grenades before crew replenishment. Personally, I like crew replenishment, but this is kind of a toss-up between, whatever you want to do. So in whatever order, so this would be first, second, third likely, then fourth, fifth, or, add this in between somewhere. Now that you have these two, we should be able to go to stage 4, if I'm not mistaken. And what I would go for in stage 4 is not the add-on armor. I would go for the engine because the engine is so incredibly crucial for Panther tanks. The mobility is one of its biggest features. Do that. Then maybe get the Panzergranaten 40/42, the APCR ammunition, because, see, it doesn't show its pen damage right there. It's how much it can pen through accurately in this case on that little stat card. So you'll want to go down. Currently it's glitching. It can actually go through 228 millimeters as opposed to the 192 that shows here. That 192 is more reflective of the APCR ammunition, or the APCBC ammunition, I mean to say. Following that, I personally would go for artillery support. And then when you go back up, being that this should, if I'm not mistaken, cost less, I'd go with elevation mechanism, go back over to filters. If you haven't gotten horizontal drive by now, I mean, definitely horizontal drive before all this, even with the Panther II, but if you haven't, now would be the time. And then go with tracks, I would say, and transmission, then suspension, because you will want to move on or fire on the move. This will be a very, very good way to do so. And brake system. So brakes, in my opinion, are always going to be last, but that's pretty much the order, give or take. I mean, you can kind of substitute what you want where, but in my opinion, that is the go-to order for how you're going to want to upgrade your Panthers after literally hundreds and hundreds of matches that I've had with Panthers across all types of game modes. And now maybe the moment that all of you have been waiting for, some of you maybe have been waiting for, my final advice when it comes to playing the Panther. Do not treat the Panther like an invulnerable tank. While it has excellent mobility, firepower, frontal protection, and more, it is still very easily defeatable, especially if you're careless. Make sure to familiarize yourself with the weak spots on the Panther, namely the sides of the hull and the front of the turret, and learn to mitigate their risk by both hiding your weak spots and limiting how much ammunition you carry into the battle. Both of these techniques will dramatically improve your survivability in any match. Also, focus on crew enhancements, namely reload speed, turret traverse, especially if you're not using the Panther D, and a slight focus on leadership, as all of these skills greatly enhance your greatest feature, your cannon. The faster you can aim and the faster that you can reload makes you a much more dangerous predator. For that matter, I would also build vitality and repair speed across the gunner, loader, and driver, as well as vision enhancements, but those are somewhat secondary compared to the first skills that I mentioned, although vitality is the most important of the secondary skills. Finally, as mentioned before, never put yourself in a spot where you need to reverse. With the exception of the Panther II, needing to reverse out of danger will almost always be a death sentence in a Panther. Only go into battle to the extent that you can fully turn yourself around by driving forward or reverse behind a building. If you follow this guide and learn everything that I had to say about the Panther tank, including the differences between each model, as these differences are very important, their various strengths and weaknesses, and more, I guarantee you that you will improve as a Panther pilot. But that said, thank you all so much for watching, everyone, especially if you got to this point in the video. This video was quite literally months in the making, so please give me a like and a subscription, as that is the ultimate show of support for my channel, especially if you genuinely enjoy my content. Please let me know what you thought about my video in the comments below, as that also means a ton to me. Either way, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.